Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm Sam Rebelein. Usually, Story Hour is co hosted by Laura Blackwell and Daniel Marcus, but this evening, I hope you can trust me to guide you through the weird, the shadows, the stars, the beautiful, and beyond. Daniel Marcus started Story Hour to help people stay connected by telling each other stories around this virtual campfire. That was over 4 years ago at this point, which is crazy to think about. That it's been that long since April 2020. Wow. So, welcome back to those returning and welcome to those joining us for the first time. As always, we have two amazing authors reading their own work. Tonight's readers are Donyae Coles and L.E. Daniels. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat if you like. Leave your little reactions in real time to the story. That's always fun. If you're here on Facebook, please be nice to each other because we are not monitoring that chat closely, but feel free to leave your reactions there as well. Um, First up tonight, we have Donyae Coles. Donyae is a speculative fiction writer. Her short work has been published in a variety of horror and other speculative fiction magazines, such as Weird Horror and Pseudopod. She has also appeared in anthologies, including All These Sunken Souls, Stories of the Eye, and Howls from the Scene of the Crime, which just came out like very recently. Midnight Rooms is her debut novel, and you can find more of her work on her website, www.donyaecoles.com, or follow her on Twitter at OKOKNO. Donyae, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time to listen to my story. It's in the chat, but I'm going to say it anyway that there are some content notes, animal death, suicide, there's a brief mention, and of course, some harsh language. And the title of tonight's tale is Rabbit Sweet. All right. Miranda was not sure on the occasion of her great aunt's funeral if she should cry or not. She was not sad, nor was she happy to see the old woman pass. It was something that had come to be an inevitable occurrence like the changing of the season, a life gone to winter. The woman was old, the hour was late. These things were to happen to everyone who stood in attendance. It was not that Miranda did not care. She had stayed with the old woman, cared for her. She wasn't even her aunt, not really. A distant relation, a cousin of someone's grandchild twice removed. The line remained unclear. Ink faded from family records where they were kept, turned to mold and dirt where they were not. What was clear was that Miranda was of some relation to her, and so she had stayed in the house, the looming old estate with its 7 bedrooms and servant quarters spread over 3 floors, its 2 sitting rooms, one for sun, one for rest, a kitchen fit to serve hundreds, to have parties, balls even, but there had been no parties, let alone balls, in the estate for a long time. The only gatherings were the funerals. There had been more of them, more than just the one. Old women, widowed or never married at all, with children, without, they all came to the estate. They had called her Miranda's family. That's how it all began. It was an aunt, middle aged to her early 20s at the time, all those years ago, who said she had gotten Miranda's number from her mother. Miranda didn't know if she meant her own mother back home across the country, or if the aunt, whose name she could not quite remember, meant her father's or her mother's mother, one of Miranda's grandmothers. Family was a vast, complex web. She had danced along the lines of it until she stuck, twisted in it, laid still. The woman on the line explained that she must come, that Miranda was needed, that she was between jobs, out of school, and didn't she have the time? Couldn't she come and be a comfort to them? The aunt, not the one in the ground, she tried to remember the name, the aunt who had called, wondered if the woman who had called her there stood who called her there stood behind her now, dabbing the corner of her eyes with a tissue so her makeup wouldn't be ruined. Sure, Miranda said. The state paid a wage. It wasn't hard work. An old woman with snow white hair had met her at the door, a gentle smile on her wrinkled face, skin the color of sandstone. She still got around all right, just needed a little help. They chatted, she and the woman. Dottie, the first had been. After her, there had been more, some overlapping. Helen, Patty, Beth, Marianne, Roberta, they just showed up one day. The phone, not her phone, the house phone, would ring shrill and loud, and the old woman of the time would pick up, speak a few words, and then, like magic, like a season changing, there would be another. They favored each other, their skin shifting a little more red, a little more tan. She saw bits of her own face in theirs. Always like the first, they would get around okay, just needed a little help. Until they couldn't, until they needed more, until they finally, blessedly needed nothing. The first, she'd been sad. It had to happen. It was always going to happen, but it was sad. The first is always the hardest, but then there was another and another and another, and somewhere along the line Miranda had forgotten how to be sad. And now the last. Miranda thought she would do something else with her time, write a book, learn an instrument, something idle she could master with her needs taken care of, or perhaps she'd study, go back to school for something practical that would serve her when it was all over. But the family kept sending old women, the state the little wage, and before she knew it, 20 years had gone, her youth had gone, and more women had gone. An aunt, a cousin, a niece of someone twice removed, a beloved family member that needed in her old age to be cared for, and there was no one else save Miranda. It was different this last time. The old heavy black phone hadn't rung. It was impossible to miss, so loud and hard it shook in its cradle. She would have heard it from anywhere if the call had come. It usually came before they passed, the next one announcing herself to the soon to be last one. A few days, but even months in advance, the phone would scream, and then the old woman would pick it up, chat a little before ending the call and making the announcement. So and so is coming. You know her. On your mother's side, daughter of a great aunt, a play aunt, a cousin, a niece, family. She had learned there were only so many ways to be connected, so many lines to travel, but they were long, ever branching, endless family. There had been no call, no announcement, no new women at the door. She and Enola had been the only ones at the estate, the big old house mostly empty but for the left behind belongings of 1,000 dead women. Then she was gone, and there was just Miranda, and she didn't know if she should cry. Body disappeared into the dark earth, and Miranda didn't know what she was supposed to do at all. Before there was another woman to escort back to the house, a Helen or a Henrietta, that was still getting around all right. Maybe she started as a temporary roommate to keep the previous old woman company, but they always stayed on, just like Miranda stayed on. More people came than she expected. More people than had ever been there before. Was this the family? The one that had sent the old women to her? Were they her family? The service was always outside, usually only a small handful of people who came and stood by the grave. Miranda and the women that would become the next old woman set for a wake, silent in their black dresses. Then the body and its box were carried out by hired pallbearers. No service. The few guests would meet them at the grave, listen to a few words of prayer from the priest, watch the body lowered, and then gone as quickly as they came. This was different. There was no next old woman, and there were many, many people. Miranda looked around sneakily without turning her head. She stood up front, right next to the grave, the dark, while all around her they wept, great heaving sobs, deep wails, sorrow. I should, she thought, finally deciding. A tear escaped her eye, slid down her cheek, then another and another. She blinked her vision clear. She couldn't tell who was she was surrounded with through the sea that became of her gaze, tumbled down her cheeks. It didn't feel like sorrow, the crying. It felt like release. She didn't know these people. Her mother hadn't come. When was the last time she had seen her mother? She was young when she come to the estate. Now she was her mother's age. Idly, fancily, she wondered if her mother was her age, the age of before. Was her mother a young woman trapezing around a college town while her daughter aged and faded at the estate? It's a lovely day, an uncle, a cousin, a nephew said. She turned, tried to catch which one it was, caught the eye of one of the wives, a cousin, an aunt, a sister twice removed, a future old woman. You were so good to stay. I could never. I know you were a comfort to her in her last days, to all of them. The woman said, crossing the distance to Miranda, wrapping her in a hug. Stale perfume rose from her jacket. The ghost of funerals passed. Miranda's muscles tightened, guts churned. There was no one else, she replied, enduring it, the smell, the heat, the touch, the praise. The day was nice for a funeral, lovely day to let things rest. They were all buried at the estate, all those aunts and nieces and granddaughters removed and forgotten in a little cemetery and neat little rows. There had never been a chapel, just a house in the little animal pens where once upon a time one of the women, when they were still a girl, raised ducks or two sheep or something else soft and dark eyed, built for slaughter. They'd all lived there as children, grew up, married, left, and had children of their own or didn't. All of them came back when they again were something that needed cared for. A cemetery just for them, all the women under the wide sky in a field lined by the great old trees that shaded the property. No forest, no woods, just a barrier of thick trunks and heavy leaves, an acre around the estate. And then they started to thin out, make way for other houses, but inside that wall, it was easy to think she was alone. Just her and the women behind their ancient wooden gate. What will you do now? The woman asked, a woman that had never been one of her women, a woman that would never be one of her women. A distance away, they were taking a lunch outside. Such a nice day, almost a lawn party, to save her on the cleaning, the caring just for a day. They'd hire someone, a company to set tables and serve food. They'd never done that before. There had never been enough people to justify any sort of catering before. The handful would leave after the woman was buried, and the new old woman would come back inside with her. Miranda would serve them both, put on the TV, start it all again. At the lawn party made from the funeral, the family ate standing, stuffing fruit and meat into their mouths, laughing, telling stories of a woman she'd never known. The woman who had come into her care was old, brittle, thinning, hair over dark, wrinkled skin. Shrunken in on herself, she collapsed inwards in her last years, weight loss from the illness of age. Miranda breathed deeply, filled her lungs with damp, cool air, damp, fresh turned soil. A pine box, a woman inside. I don't know. In the estate, there was only the care of the old women, their fading lives and short comfort. There were ways to live that she couldn't conceive outside, beyond the tree line. I hadn't thought about it. A lie. She thought of it every day for years and years, staring out of windows, listening to old women die, staring at the ceiling of the room that was not hers, listening through walls to old women dying, becoming an old woman, dying. What were you, 25, 26 when you came here? The woman pressed. The lawn party was ending beyond them. People, that unknown family, was beginning to say their goodbyes, find their cars. So quickly things ended, she thought idly. Yeah, Miranda confirmed. A good deal, free rent. She thought she right, or paint, or meet a small town hunk when he came to fix the roof. At least figure things out. But no, she had just stayed, and the old woman had come. And now none, just her. All around, the day grew longer, colder, while she made idle chatter with the woman next to the grave. One by one, the family left, said their goodbyes, their need anythings, call me's, their let's catch up soon, come down my ways. And the woman, who was of some relation, as they were all of some relation, released her, made her way back to her own car. The lawn party missed, leaving Miranda finally, blessedly alone. The people hired cleaned up the tables, the food that was left. Miranda waited next to the grave, too late to eat. Bill paid, nothing to settle. They went back to their vans. She turned back to the house, felt the wind, smelled the woods that weren't on it, smelled the grave and stale perfume, fresh turned earth, dying flowers, mostly roses, the scent bred out of them in favor of color, barely clinging, a memory fading like ink on a page as they withered in the wreath. She'd have to take it down in a few days, burn it with the rest of the trash. Remember that there was no old woman. The reef could stay. The trash could stay. Alone, she stomped across the grass until it turned gravel. The caterers were pulling away. Exhaust filled her nostrils, and she paused, watched them make U-turns in the empty lot, roll out of the gate. Her own car, usually parked right in front of the door of the large house, she pulled around the back. The front had been full of the family's cars moments ago, but now it was empty. Empty as the estate. That's what everyone called it, but it was a house, really, a large house, but there were no wings, no grand dining rooms, just a house for a large family built at a time where people still had large families. But the family had left, and now it was just her. She knew a little of it, the history. It had been explained by the first old woman that her father had purchased the place when he did well in business. Still, It was told then again by another woman that it was Cole and her father, then another that it was her uncle, her brother, her nephew, and then her father again, and the stock market, construction, a gold mine, poker. Their stories twisted around each other, contradicted, overlapped. The basics. There was a man who was of a relation. He had come into money. He had purchased the estate. The bones of the story never changed. The purpose of the estate remained the same. It was where the women came to die. It was where Miranda had come. She breathed deep, hoping the knot woods would pull away the funeral smell from her sinuses, drown it with leaves and bark and grass. There was there was wet, misty atmosphere wet. She opened her eyes, looked at the sky, saw the clouds, noticed how hard the wind was whipping at her skirts for the first time, and shivered. The day had turned. I'll get the car. I'll go. I'll start driving before the rain gets bad, she thought. The driveway would turn tricky, the road slippery if she waited any longer. But it would be fine if she went early, quickly, now. She wouldn't stay there. It wasn't her home. Her bags were already in the trunk of the one thing she had, her car, her means to be away. When the old woman had died, she waited for the call, but the heavy phone signaling that another was coming did not ring. It had not rung in the last weeks when it should have. There was no arrival. The old woman had made her final calls for her arrangements, died alone with only the poor company of Miranda. Miranda waited to call for the body. When it was all done and over, finally done and over, the phone did not ring. She left the thing that had once been the old woman in the bed and had once been in the living room, went to her own little room at the top of the creaky stairs, the entire second floor hers, third floor and the attic too, if she wanted. The woman stayed below, the kitchen, the dining room, the sunrooms. They didn't do stairs. Miranda lorded above, but she stayed to her one single room. It wasn't meant to be forever. Her entire life, 20 years from the first call, fit into two suitcases and a duffel bag. The room was empty, mattress bare, dresser cleaned out. She hadn't told the family that she was leaving. She didn't want them to know. It was her only chance to get away. Even at the funeral, through the teary sobs, she was afraid they would trap her, that another would appear to hold her there. It would begin again. This is Bertha, Patty, Ruthie. Won't you stay? Won't you stay? It would never end. There would be another, another, another. No more. She had a life. She would have a life. There was still time. She'd been 20, something that was 20 years ago, but now she was in her 40s and there was still time. She had her health. She could find someone to love her, get a job, have a life of her own, free from the family, the old women. She had to go. She had to leave. She would never come back. She'd die in the world. She'd fling herself into the ocean to keep her body free from the ground of the estate. The wind picked up, whistled around her, snatched at her skirts, pressed her blouse to her skin before spilling through it. Cold, freezing suddenly across the empty drive, the sound of the door slapping open and closed in his cradle on its frame called her. The shed. There hadn't been animals for a long time. Rabbits were the last of them, kept by the third to the last old woman to pass, a whole herd of them. They kept having babies. When the old woman took ill, Miranda came out to care for them. She fed them. She watered them. She did not touch them. She did not clean. They weren't her pets, her charges. She would not do more. Every other morning, she found a baby half eaten, and they kept having them. They filled the cage one on top of the other, fucking, birthing, dying. She thought about letting them go, but rabbits were invasive. She left them in the cage. Who lived, lived. The others rotted underneath them. When the old woman died, she stopped feeding them, closed the door, thought no more of it. But now the shed door stood open. She could hear it swinging in the wind. It didn't matter. She should lead it. She knew. Go get in her car. Get out of there before it turned dark on her, before the road became impassable. But it was one last thing. Shut the door. Hide the rabbits. Miranda turned, gravel crunching under her steps, made her way across the lot to the shed. It was a stable once. It had held at least a horse, but that had been long, long ago. She'd seen the pictures of the goats and the chickens. It had been modified, changed, made suitable to hold less noble livestock, like the house had been. Bedrooms closed and packed. Beds moved downstairs. Beds changed out for hospital bed, meant to be temporary. They moved back upstairs Upstairs in the living room, where the sun came in softly through the large windows, the curtains heavy when the sun wasn't welcome, but all stayed like she stayed. The shed, once a stable, loomed ahead of her. One side of the double door opened and closed with the force of the wind. White paint, pilling with age, slammed against the frame, making the second door rattle, beckoning. Come see, come see. A snuffling, rooting sound, snorting, snapping noise. The wind, thought Miranda as she approached, the noise rousing louder, wetter in her ears. The rabbits didn't make the rabbits didn't make any noise, not even when they were fucking or birthing or dying, crushed and starved by their bodies of their families. All the mothers and fathers that were brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents, all stuffed in one cage to die. They died silent and afraid of predators, but there were none, not there, just Miranda's apathy. She needed to close the door. It flew open as she approached, stayed that way, invited her in. The wind pulled at her skirts playfully. Come on, come on, come on. Been a while, it said. Been so long since you fed the rabbits. The snuffling, snapping, searching filled the shed. A rutting sound, not fucking, but oh, close, close. The concrete floor was wet, even though the roof was sound, and it hadn't even started raining yet. Miranda couldn't tell what it was she saw. Her mind put together the bits of it. The cage was knocked over, and there were rabbits everywhere, some half crushed, others missing feet and ears, gnawed off by their fellows, but still they hopped and pranced, with matted brown and tan fur, their teeth grown cartoonishly long, their bodies sustained on blood and meat of the others, themselves, their family. Free from the cage, they stayed in the room, shuffled around the great void that stood in its center, the cage, the room, all they knew. Even the cold concrete of the floor was alien. The floor was wet. She didn't smell it, the blood and shit and piss smell that should have been there. Instead, there was the death scent, that odd, impossibly sweet, spoiled scent, that sugary meat scent that poured from a body on his last days. She lived in it. It clung to her. She knew it all the way down to her bones. The snuffling, snorting, cracking void lifted its head. A dog. It could be a wolf from the size, but it was a dog. Huge and black, the biggest dog she'd ever seen, but a dog all the same. It didn't have the fur, the eyes of a wolf. Even with its muzzle all dripping with blood, it still had the eyes of a dog, the droopy ears, the mismatched body of a mutt with short, stiff, dark fur, the peculiar scent of a tame thing gone wild. It regarded her with shiny, hunger-filled eyes, black nestled in black, great white teeth, and a long pink tongue that wiped at its muzzle of the remains of its treat. The fur along his back rose. A low growl is only a warning. It leapt at her, great lean body all muscle and movement, jaws spread wide to swallow. The rabbits, predator blind, used to eating and being eaten, stood still, watched. Miranda screamed, turned, stumbled, ran, the dog's hot breath on her shins. The air passed, honey thick and slow. She was slow, too slow. The years had been sitting, rocking, driving, carrying. Now she wheeled her body forward and up the landing to the dog at her heels. The door, she'd die at the door, but luck had her. The door had been left open. A careless aunt, uncle, cousin, someone had gone in and left it cracked. Miranda flew through it, slammed it shut. The dog on the other side, crashing, scratching, barking as she latched it, locking it tight. She stood back to the wood as if her weight would somehow hold it better, even as she rocked with each attempt the dog made at throwing its body through the blocked portal. She tried to calm her breathing, tried to bring herself back to center. It must have wandered in from the neighbors, miles, but dogs wonder. No collar, but farm dogs don't always have them. Or maybe it slipped off, she said, a story to explain the world. Animal control, she said to the empty house. She'd call. Miranda had stopped paying for her cell phone years before. She never went anywhere. Towards the end of it all, towards the end of all of them, she stayed in, had the groceries delivered, the phone, the big black rotary dial that sat in the living room in easy reach of the bed. The old women liked to make calls, make arrangements while she watched. They were always so clear right up until the end. They knew they warned her it would be time soon. Then they started with the calls. Miranda made sure their schedule was kept. Miranda used it to call the people to take the bodies. She needed to call the animal control people. She slowly stepped away from the door, inched quietly down the hall and the door, shuddering in the frame with each slam of the animal's body. Rabbit. Or maybe just sick from those rabbits. Rabbit to rabbit, sick all the same, she thought. Miranda scurried away into the darkness of the house. The clouds had come and just then a bolt of lightning whirled bright and thick through the window, a beat of silence, and then a clap of thunder like a slap. She felt it through her entire body. The door stood still. A breath, too, and then the rain. Thick sheets of it pounded on the windows, drummed on the roof, slid down the walls. It echoed through the house, soaked into the wood, turned the drive into a river, the roads into the sea. She needed to call animal control. There was still time to get out, get away, if she could get past the dog. The hospital bed was still there, all the odds and ends of things that needed to be packed up and put away, all the pieces of the caretaking, and there next to it all was the phone. Near panic, she lifted the receiver and heard nothing at all. She pressed the prongs of the cradle quickly, as if she could summon the dial tone with Morse code. The storm, she said to the house. She reached for the lamp that she read by when the old woman retreated into the last of their thoughts. It clicked, but there was no light. The storm had taken it. The storm had taken it all. The air was cold. The house was dark and empty save her. There was no one else. She was the last. Miranda had cared for the old women, had done everything she was supposed to do, had given her life to sit and watch each of them die so they wouldn't die alone, so they wouldn't die in a hospital. They died at the estate, were buried on the land. What more did the house want from her? She rubbed her arms to chase the chill that had grown with the day. It's left, she mumbled to herself. The dog, the lightning, the thunder, it would have run away. She walked to the windows to prove it, slipped her fingers through the heavy curtains that kept out the sun. Behind it, the window frames were already swelling, already sealing themselves shut. In the wavering, drowning outside world, a void waited. Prancing, panting on the other side of the glass was the dog. Miranda bit her lip, and the dog stopped its patrol, looked up to the rain into the windows. Its lips rolled back, and for a moment she thought it would come for her through the glass and wood, crash into the bedroom, once living room, death room forevermore. But it barked, frustrated, and turned, dashed back towards the front. The rabbits. She'd left the rabbits. She had to leave. The last old woman, the great aunt, she said. She'd only lasted a few months. Miranda was so tired. She wanted a life. The aunt had come lively, all smiles, baking and humming, and still needing her. She told her stories, not unlike the stories she'd heard before. They always told the same story. It was supposed to be temporary, but she had stayed so long. The last one faded fast, and that was good. Miranda had gotten good at it, she had gotten good at the keeping of the old women. They didn't last long with her anymore, and that was good. She shut the door on the rabbits. I'll go. I've had enough. I've done enough, she said to the empty bed, the phone, the estate. Her keys hung by the bed. She snatched them up. Her purse was already in the car. The car was ready. The ground would be mud already, but she'd make it out. She'd outrun it once. She'd be quick. The dog would have gone back to the shed to keep out the rain, back to the rabbits. The house had been partially packed for years. She'd done it herself, little by little, boxed up small knickknacks that hadn't belonged to anyone but the house anymore. Covered the furniture, had shrunk all the living space into a few rooms on the first floor. When she come at first, she thought it seemed like a nice thing to do. What would happen after the woman passed? And it had taken her so terribly long to pass. Miranda didn't know anything about the estate, the old women, what her life was really becoming. She thought she was doing a service before she learned what service really was. The first had cried, begged her, and Miranda had cried, but she was doing her best, and now it was all over. She was leaving. She'd outrun the dog. What she was taking was already ready. The rest was trash. The rest was the house. She walked quickly through the rooms. She heard through the ceiling, under the rain, something that sounded like footsteps. Her mind playing tricks in the old house. The only ghosts were the ones she made of cabinets and couches. She passed the mantel filled with old bells, a mirror behind it, another bed in this room where she kept the next old woman when they were transitioning, cycling through her charges. The lightning lit up the room as she caught her wild, darkened reflection. The wind, the run had pulled her hair from its style, thrown it all over her head, more gray than black than she remembered. Her clothes were ramshackle, torn, creased, buttons coming undone, skirt askew. Her eyes were wide and sunken, and until that moment she hadn't realized she'd gotten so old, so very old. Had it really only been 2 decades? Did she remember it correctly? Time moved so quickly. No, she said, breathing deep. I'll clean up at the motel. She sped up. Those footsteps were all above her, the empty second floor filled with small steps, excited steps. The rain, she said as she walked through the halls between sitting rooms, the steps following her to the stairwell, and now she heard the low voices in the walls, a trick of the rain in the dark. She wouldn't be fooled. She wouldn't be held. A reflection, the sound, a trick. Maybe even the dog and the rabbits. There was no way, no way, she thought. It had been too long. It had all been too long. To the kitchen where the old refrigerator stopped humming. No power. It smelled sweet. Spoiled sugar meat sweet. Rabbit sweet. She was almost free, nearly out, her keys cut into her hand, and her body hit the door like the dogs had hit, desperate to get in, desperate to get out. Miranda gasped the knob, pulled open the door. Wind and wet came in from outside, wrapped around, and behind her she heard the bells all ringing at once, and she turned, couldn't stop the turning. The old women, all of them, stood in the threshold of the kitchen. They filled the room, crushed each other, spilled all over through the house. More old women than she'd ever cared for, more women than she'd ever laid to rest on top of each other. Dark eyes wide, silently filling the halls over and over and on and on. Miranda turned, refusing what she knew. Refusing what she knew. There was time. There was still time. Enough, enough! She howled into the wind. The world outside the door, her car, everything blurry with the rain. In the center of the porch, a void. The dog. It leapt, and Miranda watched this time as the rabbits had watched. It wrapped its sharp jaws around her throat, and then Miranda understood there had never been anywhere else to go. The end. I'm out of pages.
Oh, wow. What a great ending line. Oh, that was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to that little tale of mine.
That humble little tale. Um, that was great. What a great way to start off story hour this evening. Thank you for sharing Rabbit Sweet, Donyae Coles. Let's take a breath just to get the smell of that story. um, L.E. Daniels is our second reader this evening, a 2023 Bram Stoker Award nominee for short fiction. Lauren Elise Daniels is an American author, poet, and editor of over 130 titles living in Australia. Her novel, Serpent's Wake, A Tale for the Bitten, from Interactive Publications, is a notable work with the Horror Writers Association's Mental Health Initiative. With Krista Carmen, Laura edited the 2022 Aurealis finalist We Are Providence, Tales of Horror from the Ocean State, from Weird House Press, and the follow-up, Monsters in the Mills, which launched at Necronomicon Providence this year. Oh my gosh, fun. Recent publications include Silk in Hush, Don't Wake the Monster from Twisted Wing Productions, and Hangman's Coming in Where the Silent Ones Watch. No way, I'll see you there.
Oh, yay!
Her poem, Night Terrors, in the HWAs of Horror and Hope, was a finalist for the 2022 Australasian Shadows Award. Lauren directs Brisbane Writers Workshop. Lauren, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you, Daniel and Laura, for helping us organize this and setting this up for us. Thank you, Donyae. Holy smokes, to follow you. Oh, man, that was incredible. I'll be sharing Darkness Repeats out of Monsters in the Mills, content warning, war themes, and body horror. I should mention, too, that Joe is based on my father's uncle, who spent 3 days under a tank in the forest of the Ardennes on his way to Bastogne during World War II. And my grandmother worked in a wool mill manufacturing the wool coats for the war effort. This is the little oil can that is mentioned in the story that actually belonged to my grandmother and my great-grandmother. So it's a very special story with a lot staked in truth. Darkness Repeats, December 1944, Ardennes Forest, south of Bastogne, Belgium. Joe scrambled low against the belly of I have to change my glasses. Sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, there. Joe scrambled low across the belly of the trench and grabbed the lapels of the German's corpse. Milky pre-dawn darkness and thick fog blanketed him and Mike, the tank gunner, under stripped boughs of oak and willow. A dusting of snow fell across the capsized wreckage and flattened vehicles of yesterday's skirmish, but the Nazi ambush had barely slowed the march of Patton's Third Army to Bastogne. Clawing at the stiff wool, Joe was past shivering now, alternating waves of heat and chill swept beneath his cotton tank driver's uniform. Inside the thin leather gloves, his fingers were numb. His shoulders screamed from the blow it took when a mine tore the treads from his tank. After one night exposed under their Sherman, he and Mike, whose gashed thigh leaked through its wrapping, were blanched with frostbite. They were the only ones in their company of 5 who'd survived. While Joe tugged at the German's overcoat, Mike fumbled with the plank-frozen legs. The woods were crawling with Nazis, and if they were caught, they'd be shot on sight. In rising metallic light, Joe swept a sharp kick to the torso of the corpse to loosen where fabric and slush had melted and frozen. With a crackle of ice, the body shifted. Mike splayed his hands, signaling to listen. Freezing cold, disoriented, and clumsy, they could easily attract a bullet. Joe exhaled a slow mist at the ground, knowing that even a puff could reveal their position. He paused. Then, as one, the men continued their attempt to wrench the coat free. Peeling back the wool, Joe looked at the broken skull, gray and deep purple in this strange light. A tap, tap, tap bounced in the fog. The men hunched, looking only at each other. Through the falling snow, another burst resounded. Then Joe glanced upward and pointed. Mike followed his gaze. The dark shape of a large woodpecker flitted higher into an oak, the tree hanging in parts by twisted heartwood and bark. Joe couldn't help but consider it good wood for building. Mike tugged on the shoulder's legs, a signal to keep going. Dawn was lighting up the fog. While Mike worked on the corpse's boots, Joe tore the coat free and stared into what remained of the German's rictus grin. He was young, maybe 18, good teeth. His wool coat, riddled with sawdust and stiff with bodily fluid, felt fine and thick in Joe's hands. Dr. Shane, you bastard, Joe whispered in a New England accent and stuffed the coat down the front of his jacket. The son of Polish immigrants, he had never cared to learn much German. Mike tore at the snowy laces, but the boots didn't budge. Joe motioned to quit and follow him. With his submachine gun poking ahead of him, Joe peered over the trench. His shoulders shrieked as he belly crawled through 6 inches of snow along a wall of briars. Back at the roadside, just near their tank and the hole they'd been living in since the ambush, Joe spotted the body of another German, raked into frozen slush by the vast treads of a panzer. A pale hand with curled fingers jutting from the churn, fingernails dusted in snowflakes. On his elbows, Mike poked at the edge of the wool coat with his trench knife, but shook his head. They slipped into the darkness beneath their tank and fought to stay warm under the shared coat. Through a crack between the scored earth and ruptured tank into the soft sounds of Mike's morphine dream, Joe watched the somber dawn unravel against a weighted sky. As the woodland slowly expanded before him, a physical pang of homesickness unfolded. A few songbirds raised a feeble strain, and Joe knew them as the wrens and bullfinches, like those back in the farm in Rhode Island where his parents, his sister Kasia, and her husband lived with their toddler. Home reached for him, and he saw himself slip from his window at night to meet his Christina. But all around the burned debris, the air filled with flurries, and a sudden firefight echoed in the distance. An abrupt light flashed in the fog between the trees. Joe tightened his grip on his weapon and craned his neck as far as his shoulder would allow. He looked back at Mike, but he was out, snoring softly. Another tremor of light, and Joe thought it was the muzzle flash of gunshots, but it was soundless and steady. The woods fell silent aside from the distant exchange of artillery. A figure parted the fog, lit up ghostly white as if by strange sunlight, and not in uniform. It moved between the cleaved trunks and sprays of soot. A woman, her arms shining and bare, gliding up over a broken slope of ash and snow and through the remains of the Ardennes. Thinking it was Our Lady of Fatima herself aflame, Joe squeezed his eyes tight and blessed himself, but when he opened them, she was there, approaching him, eyes bright as firelight and fixed upon him in his secret darkness. Joe recoiled, bumping against Mike. It was no vision of the Blessed Mother. The woman's eyes were hungry, her mouth open wide as if to scream. It was his Christina, his bride, and she was ablaze. Licks of bright flame consumed her body, shimmering with orange embers. The fire swooned her blackening palms into swirling ash, charring and crumbling her arms and legs into a serpentine trail of dust. Joe threw himself back into the dirt of the trench and convulsed. Mike roused and pinned him, breathing, "Shh, Joe, shh, shh, shh." But Joe bucked. But Joe slammed his knees and boots into Mike again and again, all the while Joe whispered, pleading for Joe's silence. Mike whispered, pleading for Joe's silence. August 1944, 4 months prior, Spectacle Cove, Rhode Island. When the soldier is hit by a cannonball, rags are as becoming as purple. Christina hated that line from Thoreau's Walden, but still it bounced around her thoughts as she leaned into her sewing machine. It made no sense and conjured terrible images of her husband Joey out somewhere in Europe fighting for the rest of them. Sometimes sentences ricocheted in Tina's head to the sticky racket of 120 treadle-operated Singer sewing machines in 120-degree heat. While she drove her hands along the machine, she refused to think about the crawling sensation that plagued every inch of her skin. Here she was, allergic to wool, working in a wool mill, while a heat wave broiled New England without pause and compounded her misery with a vicious rash. The mill that manufactured the olive drab winter overcoats for the war effort had become an oven, gray granite walls luminous with fibers and its thick oak doors locked to prevent the seamstresses from wandering off for a breath of air. Teen to middle-aged seamstresses surrounded her, all packed into tight rows. The women pedaled their treadles of their sewing machines ankle deep in 6 inches of fuzz that blanketed the machine oil-soaked floor. The whole place smelled like bodies and burning oil. Sweat stung Tina's eyes, but she didn't dare lift a hand or dry her face on her shoulder, not since she'd run the needle right through her fingernail yesterday. Once was enough. Oops-a-daisy. The foreman had breathed his coffee and tobacco breath over her shoulder, an unlit hand-rolled cigarette pinched between his crooked lips. After pulling her finger free, Tina clutched it, pounding to her chest. Don't bleed on the coat, the foreman patted her shoulder. Let the soldiers do that. Kasia, Joey's sister, muttered in Polish, Kapusta głowa, cabbage head. English, Dolly, he poked a finger into her purse, or I'll help myself to some of your tickets. Today, Tina pushed wool along the slide plate, a little more mindful of the plunging needle, attaching one sleeve at a time to an overcoat. Despite her injury, she was still the fastest seamstress in the mill, bringing $19 a week, while most of the others only made $5 to $10. She had Joey to think of, and every single coat was for him. Beside Tina, Kasia's machine choked, and she whipped her machine apart again. The sooner she could fix it, the sooner she could get back to work without holding up the line. Still, Tina worked faster to cover for her, while Kasia flicked the stop latch and spun the hand wheel. With the tiny oil can she kept in the fold of her skirt, she oiled each one of the pieces and joints, dripping everywhere except on the coat sleeve splayed before her. And with a swift tap, 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 she locked each part back into place. Again, Kasia was pedaling and tossed her sleeve into the cart. The seamstresses worked piecemeal, assembling the coats bit by bit. An army of X-frame carts rolled pieces along the lines. Most seamstresses grabbed the same pieces to keep the pace high, backs or sides, lapels or sleeves. When a machine snarled up, and while the seamstress oiled her machine, critical in keeping the metal and belts from growing too hot, the other seamstresses doubled down to keep the line moving and the foreman away. For each completed job, the seamstresses tore a 3-inch perforated ticket from the item and dropped it into their purses perched in the wool tied under their machines. Each ticket was worth a penny. It wasn't Kasia's fault she had a bum machine. When they paused for 5 minutes to unwrap and eat their sandwiches, Tina slipped her sister-in-law a handful of tickets, and the ritual commenced. Kasia refused them in Polish. Tina pushed the tickets back, muttering in Italian, until Kasia accepted, and they traded half a kielbasa on rye for half of peppers and egg sandwich. The American seamstresses took out their peanut butter and jelly, and the line slowed to a crawl. The foreman crossed the floor with his metal lunchbox, lighting his cigarette as he unlocked the doors for himself and left. Kasia called him a cabbage head again, but Tina, determined to make Kasia laugh with her mouth full, called him coglione. What's that? Kasia mopped her forehead with a napkin before folding it back into her purse. More vulgar than your cabbage head. Tina mimed grabbing his manhood with a twist and squeezing. They snorted and crackled, but when they finished eating, started pedaling again. Soon, Walden twisted around Tina's thoughts, and she tried not to think about the crawling itch that plagued her body. When the soldier is hit by a cannonball, rags are as becoming as purple. It was Joey's idea to exchange pocket-sized copies of Walden on their wedding night. From their hotel room near the courthouse, they'd watch the sun rise on their only night together, twin books mixed in with the rumpled bedclothes. Christina's head was resting on Joey's chest when she asked, "How can a boy with so little chest hair go off to war?" "I have enough." From his voice, she could tell he had his eyes closed. "Mother said we should exchange Bibles." "I couldn't write all my love notes in a Bible. Besides, this is about the life we'll build together when I get back." Christina flicked through the pages of his underscores and drawings of tiny pumpkins with curly vines, then stopped. "But look at this. I don't want to read this when you're gone." She pointed to a sentence. "Why should they begin digging their graves as soon as they're born?" Joey took the book. He squeezed her to him as he flipped to a sentence he'd underlined twice. "Here, when you miss me, think of the pumpkins will grow, big enough for your majesty." Now, as she rounded the shoulder seam along her needle, she turned her thoughts to Joey's line. "I'd rather sit on a pumpkin and have it all to myself than be crowded on a velvet cushion." And with a deep exhalation through an itchy nose, she let that big, bright orange pumpkin roll round and round in her mind. Day 2, Ardennes. During Europe's coldest winter in 30 years, Joe, tank driver and technician fourth grade, and Mike, a corporal and gunner, were the only two of their 5-man crew still breathing under the carcass of their Sherman M4A3, while Patton's forces marched to aid the 28th Infantry and 101st Airborne Divisions in Bastogne. In just a few days, they'd arrive and beat the Nazis back toward Berlin, without Joe and Mike. Before they'd found themselves in this wreck, their crew had made it from England through the hedgerows of Normandy and Corentin. They dodged what would have been a fatal tangle with a Tiger tank by reversing straight into a French farmhouse, crashing through the floorboards, and crawling backward from the root cellar undetected. They laughed about it all the way to Mainz, Germany, before they got the call to help the Americans encircled at Bastogne. As the crew joined Patton and rolled northeast, the temperature dropped and the men mumbled about a lack of rations and winter gear. George, the radio operator, delivered the bad news. "Supplies of snafu food at the quartermaster in Antwerp. Winter coats, K-rations, munitions. We got to make do with what we got." That was last week. Now, much of their supplies gone with the mine, except for one first aid box and some morphine Joe had scavenged from the wreck. They faced another frigid night, sucking snow in the Ardennes, wrestling with hypothermia and dehydration. Somewhere, shells were falling. Nothing else moved in the woods. Mike licked bouillon powder from a foil pouch from under the coat they shared. When he removed his gloves, his fingertips were black. Joe shifted his weight around his injured shoulder and inspected his own fingers. Bleach white. He couldn't feel his toes either, and in that cramped space, he couldn't take off his boots to look. He pulled his gloves back over his hands and looked at Mike. His face gaunt, his skin pocked and peeling, stubble and dark circles gave him a sunken look. Joe regretted the panic that overtook him earlier, the nonsense of it. He was sure he kicked Mike right in the wound, but the gunner hadn't said a word. "I'm sorry," Joe began. "No." Muffled against the shared coat, Mike snapped a bar of chocolate and handed it to Joe. Joe gave him their last packet of sulfanilamide tablets for infection. They were just holding out for the Red Cross to show, and it would be tomorrow, they decided. When Joe's breathing rolled into the shallows again, Joe took the morphine styrette from his lap and pulled the coat over him. In the growing darkness, Joe wondered where his copy of Walden had landed. He dared not look in the tank where his brothers were in pieces, but he remembered that one line, "Why should they begin digging their graves as soon as they are born?" Joe cradled his gun and kept watch through the crack in the deepening fog. When they'd been hit, they were told to stay put and wait for the medics trailing the march. Now it was hard to tell if the shells were falling before or behind them. August, spectacle cloak. Descending the stairs of the mill after their shift, Christina and Kasia trailed the troop of damp, sweaty seamstresses. Tina stopped to scratch her shins on the landing. Once she started, she couldn't stop. The tangle of pleasure was hypnotic, searing pain, a relief against the itch. Kasia gently touched her shoulder. "Stop, Tina, you're bleeding." Christina straightened, blood under her nails, her skin burned. "I'm sorry," Tina began. "No," Kasia said. "I see you, my sister." When they reached the ground floor, Tina and Kasia waited for the crates to stream from the elevator to the loading dock. Trucks took the coats to a ship in Spectacle Cove shipyard, and from there they were bound for New York, then London. Tina wiped a hand across her bow, and through the manager's open door, she read the headline on his desk, Death Valley Days. But she didn't need a newsie to tell her how hot it was. Her shins bled into her socks. Her entire body burned. She'd just have to wait and see how bad it looked when she got home. Then a dark thought. At least Joe wouldn't see her like this. Scored flesh, blisters swelling. He'd run screaming, she thought, and raked her fingernails across her arms. Jim is trying to get us a job, Kasia said. We just need to hold on a little longer. Kasia's husband was one of the managers at nearby Frontier Parachute. His name was Zygmunt, but in America, everyone called him Jim. Tina tried not to limp, her feet aflame now as she exited the great oak doors, the sparkling granite blinding in the late afternoon glare. The two of them walked toward Tina's home, where she would live with her mother until Joe returned. Her mother took in sewing and ran a daycare for the children of the mill workers, including Jim and Kasia's 2-year-old boy, Andre. They made it as far as the front path before Andre burst from the door and wrapped himself in his mother's skirts. Kasia scooped him up. Oh, you smell like strawberries. Look, Andre held a plump berry to his mother's lips. Thank you, my sweet boy. She turned to Tina. I'll see you in the morning. Tina took to the back step of her house, but nightfall brought little relief. Cicadas buzzed in the dark, a relentless mechanical sound. Tina stripped while her mother brought her a pan of water with baking soda. She sat in her brassiere and slip, scratching the soles of her feet ragged on the lip of the concrete step. Beside her, Walden was face down, cracked at the spine. Her mother handed her a towel. Oh, Ophelia, me, you're only making it worse. Tina grunted. Pain is better than this godforsaken itching. Blisters oozed and blood peppered her arms and legs, but worst of all were the gaping sores under her breasts. Carefully and with her injured finger extended, Tina unhooked the clasps at the back of her bra and peeled the satin trim from the crust of her wounds. She lifted one breast at a time and patted the lesions with the baking soda rinse. Again, the deep prongs of stinging were far better than the itch. Finally, while she soaked her feet, she slipped into a cotton camisole. She examined her arms in the light from the kitchen window and pulled tiny wool threads from where they'd lodged in her pores. Then she patted herself all over again with cornstarch, knowing she'd do it all over again tomorrow. She glanced at her clothes in a heap, then placed the book in her lap and scanned a line. All costume off a man is pitiful or grotesque. She laughed. Behind her, her mother let the screen door slap. Is there no relief from this heat? Her mother asked, shaking the hem of her nightdress. She pointed to the little book. Most couples exchange Bibles. It's Joe reminding me of the house he's going to build me in the woods. With what? He didn't even buy you a decent ring. Her mother lifted Tina's hand into the light. This costume jewelry has already turned your finger black. Tina pulled her hand away. I wish you hadn't married him like that before he left. You should have waited. They'd eloped to the town courthouse with Kasia and Jim as witnesses the day before he shipped out for basic in Georgia, something that was never done in this family. Her mother would never forgive her, and Christina accepted it as fact. He loves me, Mama. He's smart. He'll keep the tank on the road and come home to me, he promised. They all promise, Ophelia, me. Her mother withdrew back into the empty house. Your father promised too. You married nothing but grief. Day 3, the Ardennes. It was dawn when Joe felt the rumble of machinery. When he tried to sit up, his hair and clothes clung to the ground. He didn't know if it was the Germans or the Allies or if he was having a seizure in the darkness beneath the tank. Joe nudged Mike, but he didn't move. He peered through the crack and saw first light and black tires grinding up slush on fat trucks. Sloppy green canvas hung off the trucks, and they looked American, but he wasn't sure. His eyes were blurry and felt frozen open. The voices started, a garble. Joe went to rub his ears, but his fingers weren't his own. When he tried to grip his gun, his shoulder pinched with spasm, and he fumbled along the stock and trigger guard. He pulled off his gloves and held his hands close to his face. They were as black as Mike's. Joe tried to free himself from the ground, but the frost held fast and held cloth and flesh. He kicked out his legs, and remembered kicking the German for a coat. Mike's head fell to the side, and a stench leaked from between them. Joe thought, Christina, 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 and wondered if he burned when she burned. He thought maybe they had both been dead for days because he couldn't feel anything except the scream of his shoulder and the fog that still rolled all around him. He saw that German's head blown apart, a boy with good teeth, probably farm-raised on milk and fresh eggs and bacon his father had hung in the smokehouse every autumn. Boots passed his view, and he heard men rounding the wreck. He turned his head, heart drumming. A face appeared. Joe waited for the muzzle and the shot. Instead, hands reached for him and pulled hard. Joe opened his mouth. His throat was so dry he couldn't make a sound. Someone poured water, freezing, into his mouth. Down his chin, he coughed. When he found himself in the milky sunlight on a stretcher, he saw the big red cross on the truck. A medic packed and strapped his bleeding shoulder, put a drip in his arm, and placed the bag on his chest. Joe turned his head to see Mike on another stretcher on the ground, sound asleep. Past him, two medics pulled the remains of his brothers from their tank, and now, finally, he wept. Beyond the trucks and milling men wending through the slopes of the snow and skeletal oaks streaked with ash, again she appeared without touching the ground. Christina ablaze. Her eyes, her pale mouth, wide, and the shimmering contortions of flames consuming her all over again. August lunch break, spectacle cloak. Time twists in on itself for the dying. Darkness repeats until somehow it breaks open. The very seams of life, torn and rent, a multitude of threads burst from this great chaotic loom of which Christina was but one. In the roar of flames and whoosh of ash, the screams emptied into an inexhaustible tide. There followed a moment, a stirring silence when the incredible pain stopped, and there was, before everything collapsed like spent cinders, one last explosive expression that reached across time and space. Earlier that day, and for no visible reason, every single one of the seamstresses stopped their treadle simultaneously. Their needles paused, and the women looked at each other. Usually a few plunged ahead for a handful more of tickets, but not then. In the dry heat of the mill, Tina's sweat evaporated like beads on a skillet. She noticed the eerie silence, as if the mill itself held its breath. A tingle of amazement shuddered through the dust motes, and the seamstresses began to smile. They held the moment a second longer, then turned to fish their lunches from their purses. As they'd done before, Tina traded half her peppers and eggs with Kasha's kielbasa as the real Americans bit into peanut butter and jelly. "What's it taste like?" Tina introduced herself to the teenage girl beside her. "Here." She offered her the sandwich. "Skippy and strawberry jam. I'm Joan." "What's Skippy?" Tina took a bite before handing it to Kasha. "Oh my God." "Ooh," Kasha said, "the jam." Bread was torn asunder, fried green peppers dangled in curls, olive oil melted with sweat on Joan's chin, and the mill rushed with a noisy chatter. As she savored the last bite, Tina saw the foreman swing the big oak doors closed and lock them, cigarette pinched between his lips, his brow furrowed. She felt her own smile fade as the smoke expelled from his nostrils, as if from a bull guarding its winter field. The foreman's lunchbox was gutted and its contents half-wrapped, as if the noise of the women had prompted his swift return to the floor. Tina saw him suck hard on the rushed cigarette, the hand-rolled paper canoeing. The bright, shining cherry fell and tumbled into the sea of wool that spanned the floor. In a flash, a carpet fire swept the room. Autumn 1955, Army-Navy surplus, Spectacle Cove, Rhode Island. "Need any help, mister?" A young sales clerk emerged from behind the gray curtains at the back of the store with a shining Brill cream hairstyle. He approached at a clip. No." Joe turned towards the clothes rack, hiding his scarred face. The clerk rested his hands on the hangers. "Well, if you need anything, just give me a holler." "Thanks." Joe shot him a look out of politeness and saw the recognition on his face. "Thank you, sir, for your service." He put out his hand. Joe sighed. He pulled his hand from his pocket and extended it, the tips of his fingers missing. The young man gently shook it before retreating. 20% off for vets," he called. A sign on the wall above the rack read, "Our very own Spectacle Cloak," and Joe felt the crackle of those words under his ribs. He thumbed through the rack until he touched wool. Outside, an automobile rumbled over cobblestones, slowly passing the large storefront window. Its windshield caught the sting of the afternoon sunlight, the glare falling sharply across Joe's eyes. He saw her, his Christina, burning, embers crumbling to ash, and his breath caught. He ran his hand down the sleeve, squeezing it hard. As he broke down, the clerk disappeared behind the curtains. Thank you.
Oof. Gosh, what an end to that one, too.
Thank you.
Two incredible ending lines tonight. Um, wow. Yeah, both very visceral stories as well. Some of those descriptions of wounds. Mm. Well, that has been our story hour for this evening. Next week, our readers are it's a bit of a tongue twister. Kat Rambo and Jessica Reisman. I recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of the reading for any last minute announcements or changes. Storyhour2020.com is also a good place to learn about upcoming authors. And you can watch any programs you may have missed at the Story Hour page on Facebook. Donyae Coles, Ellie Daniels, thank you so much for sharing your stories tonight. And thank you, Laura Blackwell and Daniel Marcus, for trusting me to help tend this virtual campfire. Thank you, SFWA, for the Givers Fund grant, which helps us keep this campfire burning. And thank you, all of you, for joining us in spinning the fictive dream. Good night from Story Hour.